profile.
Okay. Did he? I don't know how to work it. I don't know. Okay. Is that some- she's with Conway. She's with Conway Court.
She'd be a lot smarter about it than I would.
No, Aaron might be at the meeting tonight. If our IT guy's here, I bet he'd help you, John. Let me see if he's gonna be here. Nice. It's not really something you should bring to us right at the time, but hey, it is what you. Wait, did that come happy with you? That's good.
You'll make sure you get your good side on the TV. There ain't no good side.
Oh, I noticed it. Yeah.
How you doing? Finally got you on. Finally got you on. You're good. Yeah. And I'll explain.
Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and start our committee meeting. We have two items to discuss during committee tonight. We'll start with Mr. John Swanson from MIMS. John, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I apologize that we were not able to get our thumb drive to work on the computer, so I don't have the actual PowerPoint to show you the charts and our performance data. I can assure you, though, for one, that our response times, although they've been creeping up, we still meet the 90% response fractile, if you will, that's expected of us. But I will also mention that we are seeing an increasing run volume. And in response to that run volume, we added a unit here to Conway about 2 years ago. It's a BLS unit, BLS meaning basic life support. There are 2 EMTs rather than a paramedic on that unit. And when you see it, you'll know it's different because it's the Mercedes-style ambulance as opposed to the big box. And the reason we did that is to basically protect the ALS units. That BLS unit takes over the transfers from nursing homes back, or from hospitals back to nursing home and that sort of thing, which is what we were doing with paramedic units before we added that truck. So by bringing that truck online, then the ALS units are more readily available to respond to the emergencies. So we did add that resource. The other thing I wanted to share with you all tonight is 2 programs that MEMS has been working on very hard in partnership with both your police and fire departments. One is called Stop the Bleed, and that is the training program where we can train citizens on how to use tourniquets and basic response things like that to help manage chest wounds, to help manage airways, to wound pack. And this is basically a program that we started back in 2014 in the Little Rock area and have expanded it out here. And that is to help people who are first on scene where there's been a bad bleed and someone is at risk of bleeding to death, that citizens are aware, trained to know how to use a tourniquet. We have had many successes with that, and I'm here tonight again to make that message so that you all can help us pass the message and get it. We provide this training for free. We'll do it for groups as small as 5 or 6. We'll come to you, be it churches, places of business, schools. We've expanded that program considerably and have had good success with that. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you is what we are doing with our cardiac arrest protocol. And I had a couple slides that would outline this for you, but I'll just try to explain that in 2015, prior to 2015, our protocol said that if we responded to a person who's in cardiac arrest, load and go as quickly as we can and race to the hospital with lights and sirens. One of the things that is quite obvious to everybody is that it's very difficult and ineffective to try to do CPR on a person when you move them at all. And so the protocol changed in November of 2015, and I should back up. Prior to that, our ROSC, which is return of spontaneous circulation. I know I used to get it confused. I'd say return of spontaneous combustion, but that's not what we want on a patient, right? Spontaneous circulation. Our ROSC rate was 15.7%, and in the 12 months preceding, in our entire system, there were only 8 people who went home having suffered cardiac arrest in the field. Since the protocol change, where we stay on scene for 30, 35 minutes, and emphasizing aggressive, uninterrupted CPR at the very beginning, our ROSC rate peaked at 39%, and since that time, we've had 121 people go home having suffered cardiac arrest in the field. The protocol is working very well, but not yet well enough. We're not satisfied. So what you're going to see is we've already put a $15,000 piece of equipment, but it's called a Lucas device. It's a mechanical CPR device. We don't use it immediately. We want to get the ROSC back. But once we just do transport a patient who is now recovered and has ROSC, we put the mechanical CPR device on them because they can still crash on the way in transport. We have patients who will have a heartbeat and then will lose that heartbeat. And so that mechanical CPR device is already in place. The other thing you'll see us do this summer in an attempt to push this forward further is what is called a heads-up CPR. Yet science has taught us yet one more thing, and that is if you are doing CPR on a person who's in a prone condition, after you do that for several minutes, what happens is both the arterial and the venous blood pressure stops the blood from circulating through the brain. And so science has taught us that if you can raise, it's about a 2-minute cycle, but it's a device that we put under the patient's shoulders and head, and it slowly raises them to a 30-degree elevation. And with that, not only improves survival rates, but improves the quality of their life because the brain is being protected. You'll see us trial that this summer. We're only the 4th company in the United States to get access to this device. And so we're going to do that as best we can. But the real reason why I wanted to be here tonight is because I wanted to emphasize the significance of the partnership that we have with the firefighters. Part of this protocol for doing the cardiac arrest survival is when we're on scene for as long as 30 minutes, then people like Clay, who is our supervisor, but we also stay on scene with the firefighters. And they have proven to be an integral part of the team that has contributed to the survival rates. So what we've done at MEMS, and initially only at MEMS, is that if you were the crew, the medic and the EMT, and possibly a dispatcher, possibly a supervisor, that if you played a critical role, an important role in the survival of this patient, now that 120 of them have gone home from the hospital, then we present you with what we call the Phoenix Award, the Rising Out of the Ashes. And I have 2 paramedics who are aces. They have won the award 5 times. But in going back, we recognized that we had omitted acknowledging the firefighters' participation and contribution to this. And so tonight we have 3 Phoenix Awards incidents to recognize. I cannot get into the details because of patient privacy. We will only speak to it as a date, but I can't get into the name or the nature of the call because of the HIPAA and patient privacy, and we need to respect that. But what we do then is provide a certificate, and I've talked to Chief Winter. I don't know if he made it back. He said he was still out
He's
looking
running
at
up
that.
and down the levee.
Yep, looking at the levee. And so we'll present both the certificate and the MEMS ribbon to our own people as well as the firefighters, if you'll allow me a couple minutes to do that. So, Clay, if you will. The first incident occurred some time ago, back in July. So if you'll just give me the stack, please. And if I'd ask you guys to come forward when I read your name. MEMS paramedic Robert Jones. This was on 2nd of July last year. MEMS EMT Hunter Brady. Conway firefighter Brian Clendenin. Conway firefighter Jonathan Arnold. And I know not all the guys were able to make it. And Conway firefighter Dale Battles. Their efforts in a cardiac arrest in the field, this patient survived and was able to leave the hospital in good shape. So, gentlemen, and I will tell you, for Hunter, this is his 3rd award. He's been here before, and congratulations. And for you guys, the chief will let you win. The gold goes for you, for the center. Allow me to hand out these certificates, if you will. Robert? Hunter? Thank you, guys. Our next one. And my crew is not here. Michael Gadati is the paramedic, and Michael is actually the recipient of the next 2 awards. But Michael's in rehab here, having suffered a month-long fight with pneumonia, and we were very worried that we would lose him. He's too stubborn, but he's not able to be with us tonight. But he's in a Conway rehabilitation facility tonight, recovering from his pneumonia. So the awards tonight I have to present are to the firefighters. And Jared Govia, did I pronounce that correctly? Come on up. Michael Felty and Myron Milholland. This is for their response to a cardiac arrest call on the 25th of October. And this patient as well has survived to make it home. And through their efforts, that's the reason why. Get the ribbon. We have their certificates. Thank you, guys. And the 3rd award, again, Michael Gadati would be the paramedic. MEMS EMT Charles Malin is here. And firefighters Clayton Moore, Danny Schock, and Jeremy Sullivan. If you guys would step up, and I'll present you with Charles. As long as you've been doing this, this is your first
First one.
one. It ain't gonna be your last. give you your certificates. And is it Sullivan that's not here? Well, if you would. Again, well done, guys. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I may set a record for the briefest presentation I've ever given. Are there any questions or anything, issues that you have concern for Ed Mims that I can take back? Questions?
So I have one concern.
Yes, sir.
I had a good friend that recently had a heart attack on April 25th.
Mhm.
Was his second, and he was unable to be transported from Conway Regional to St. Vincent in a timely manner based on, I guess he said there was no portable ventilator in one of the units. Do you got, or is that specific to certain units? Not all of them have a
No.
portable ventilator?
No, those are kept in the main station so that they're readily available.
Okay.
So I'm happy to look into it because I don't know the details of the circumstances that you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know what the exact time distance was.
Sure.
But I know that his wife had time to leave the hospital, go home, grab clothes, shower, then go to St. Vincent and still beat the ambulance.
Mhm. And that can happen.
That was one of the concerns that I
That is a
got,
legitimate
'cause
concern.
he was having an active heart attack.
Right, that's a legitimate concern.
So,
And so I will offer you this much to say that if there's a unit available, it will immediately come. But if the units have already been assigned to calls, then it will either require us to send a unit from Little Rock, or in the judgment of the folks on the street at that time,
Right.
do we anticipate the unit here is going to come available faster than the unit from Little Rock had arrived?
right.
And when the request is made, normally but not always, the patient's not ready to go. And the third component is that if we have to go pick up equipment, there might be a delay in that too. But I'll be glad to look into the specifics of that and answer your
I'd like
question.
him to. I'd like to.
So the date again,
April 25th.
okay? And I won't ask for the
Yeah, I
name.
can give you the
I won't ask for the name, but we can figure it out
Sure.
and I'll be glad to answer your question. Okay? What else can I offer?
Can you give me a contact for the Stop the Bleed training?
Yes, ma'am. The main number is 301-1400. The person who is in charge of actually scheduling that is at 301-1404. And my number is at 301-1419.
Okay.
And I would appreciate the assistance in the Stop the Bleed as well as the CPR training. We'll provide that as well.
Okay. Thank
We
you.
call that friends and family CPR. You don't do mouth-to-mouth anymore. And so, but please, if there's anybody you want to connect to us, we'll be happy to provide the training.
I'm going to have the director of our response team at church contact you, John.
Yes, sir.
About the Stop Bleed program. And I appreciate the job that Mims does in Conway, and I really appreciate you recognizing the Conway firefighters. That was
betcha.
really nice of you.
Not at all. It's part of the team.
It is. Thank
Yep,
you.
appreciate it.
John, John,
Yes,
I'd
sir.
like to say too that at the road department, we had 40 of our people go through the Stop the Bleed. And it was excellent. Yeah, it was an excellent course. They
Yep.
did a fine job.
You know, and let me just say in response to that, I think that the biggest challenge we face is for people, lay people, citizens, to have the confidence to know it's okay to act. You're afraid you're going to do the wrong thing. You're not doing the wrong thing. And so that's part of it. The training, pump in the chest, putting a tourniquet on, you don't put it 2 inches above the wound anymore. You put it in the armpit or the groin and you turn it until the bleeding stops. It's pretty straightforward. So, anyway.
You
thank
need any
Mr. Mayor.
training mannequins, Mr. Deere said he'd be glad to.
It hurts, I promise you, because I've done it. It hurts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
They prefer normal slide.
Oh, my God.
You know what, put that tourniquet on. When I get stressed, I beat my head against the wall.
I understand that. Mr. Vincent. Next up, we'll discuss our roundabout study.
Hello, everyone. It's been a long day. There's a lot of information here. You guys are free to keep this if you'd like to read the whole thing, or you can throw it in the trash, or you can give it back to me and I'll recycle it. The majority of this is appendices. the important stuff starts, well, it's all important. Forgive me. Let me rephrase that. The juicy stuff starts on page 26. I'm sorry, we're looking at the roundabout feasibility report, this one right here. 26, which I believe is available on the City of Conway Transportation Department website for those following at home.
It's funny.
So we chose to analyze 6 roundabouts with the goal of deciding which ones were most important to, 6 intersections with the goal of deciding which ones were most important to convert to roundabouts. Those intersections were College and Ferris, Tyler and Salem, Prince and Hogan, Prince and Country Club, Irby and Salem, and College and Prince. And we looked at several parameters: safety, delay, constructability, and we also performed a public survey. Bobby Kelly helped with that. And so I'm going to walk through a few of those things. The first one is safety. We were not able to do a detailed crash analysis, but we do have a basic crash analysis at each one of these intersections. And on page 26, that's that chart there. You can see how many crashes we have reported at each one of those intersections, and they're ranked accordingly. The control delay on page 27, those are ranked in accordance with how much converting the signal or the intersection as it currently exists to a roundabout, how much that would improve delay at each intersection, which is the easiest way to measure congestion relief. Page 28 is essentially constructability. We looked at utilities that were in the way, right-of-way that would need to be acquired, and also things like grade that would make constructability either difficult or easy, relatively. And then lastly, on page 29 was the survey. Bobby Kelly would probably like me to say that this was not a scientific poll. It was just a Facebook survey. And so we should take that with a grain of salt. The last 2 pages, pages 30 and 31, are the conclusion, which if you were to skip the first paragraph, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs. Each one of those paragraphs is a summary of each of those roundabouts, and they are roughly listed in the order that the study would recommend that they be constructed. So that is as quickly as I can break down over 100 pages for you.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I just want to comment on one of them. This Irby and Salem, I hear about that all the time.
Right, so you might notice
Yeah, I saw
that
that,
it was first. There's actually 2 ways you could measure the survey, either per IP address, which is basically per household, or the total number of votes. And based on the total number of votes, it won. That one is special of the 6 because it's the only one that's not currently a signal. And we did a warrant analysis on it, which is fancy speak for we measure the traffic to determine if it needs a signal or not. Because the other ones are all already signals, and it does meet the warrant for a signal. So the traffic is high enough where it warrants consideration, kind of. So that one's special. That one's kind of doesn't fall in the same boat as the rest of them. And that was one of the reasons that I would say that there are 2 that rose to the top. One was College and Prince. That was really the only one that ranked high in every category. And the other one was Irby and Salem because it's currently warrants more control than it has. And there were several other categories that it ranked relatively high on.
College and Prince, I mean, I go through that intersection daily, and to me, the signal works great, traffic flows really well. I mean, I would think it would be pretty much on the bottom of it.
I was pleased that it ranked high. because I think after the roundabout gets built at College and Donaghy, I'm sorry, it's been a long day, forgive me. College and Prince, I'm thinking College and Ferris. Yeah, College and Prince, I was kind of surprised by that one as well, to be honest. And it's not, it's probably not in my, we debated, I'm going to turn back to the page you're looking at.
It probably is the best signaling stoplight we have in Conway, I feel like.
Right.
I mean, you know, cars come, it changes, you know, it just flows really well.
And that's the reason that based on this, again, rough recommendation of order, it was the last one.
I think Salem and Tyler was probably the one I would pick. If you've been lived through there trying to get from French Street to State 40, it's terrible.
It certainly is.
You know, at Irby and Tyler, you have,
Irby and
you know,
Salem.
Irby and what?
Salem.
Yes, Irby and Salem, I'm sorry. You know, we've got flowing traffic through there. I mean, would there be a chance of signaling that and roundabout?
Yes, that is a possibility. Yes, it is.
There's people telling me they can't get off Irby to
Right.
Salem.
You can,
You just can't get on it.
and cars are flying downhill.
I think that is primarily the reason that it was included in the study from the beginning.
Finley,
Yes.
are we still on schedule to do our work on Tyler this year?
Yes.
Okay. Does that include any roundabouts on Tyler?
No. That is primarily an overlay project. It's kind of got three components. We will overlay Tyler from the Washington roundabout all the way west to where the curb and gutter stops. We will also be rebuilding, not fully rebuilding, but the pavement in the western section. I can't remember what road it is, but if you drive out west, you can kind of see where the pavement starts to fall apart. So what we're going to have to do is remove all that pavement, cement, stabilize the base, and then put all the pavement back. And then we're also adding, we've combined this kind of with the sidewalk project on Tyler, which goes from Gatlin Park to Washington. So that section won't get the asphalt overlay until the sidewalk's done.
I don't want to speak for Alderman Grimes, but is this what you're getting at? We only have the one intersection listed on Tyler. We're going to be rebuilding and resurfacing Tyler this year. Would we be better off go ahead and doing the roundabout there while we're doing all resurfacing? Then we're finished with that, whereas otherwise we're going to resurface it and go back, tear that out, and build a roundabout. Is that kind of what you were thinking, David?
Yeah, among other things. I mean, you're right, the intersection there at Tyler and Salem, pretty tight as far as right-of-way. You got fences and houses, and it's not awfully big, but, you know, Bart, like you and I talked recently, the bigger issue with Salem is from Tyler northward, you know, expanding it. You know, that's another discussion for another day, but it's got to handle more traffic, and you got lots of houses and stuff there. But again, that's another discussion for another day. But if we're doing Tyler, you know, like I say, does it make sense to go ahead and just put that roundabout in as we're doing it?
It would take me some time. I haven't started designing any of these, and I think I need to allow some time for the design. We started advertising the overlay project. We've already advertised the overlay project in order to stay on track.
We're probably too late to get to it.
Well, it would be difficult to do it this summer. And it would maybe be possible to do it this year, in the calendar year, maybe. But I think a lot of even if we let it this year, I think a lot of the construction would end up, because it's probably going to be cold and wet by the time we designed it and advertised it and let it and open bids. I think it's likely that the construction would spill over into next year.
Will any of these take effect this year?
We will start designing immediately, but I think probably the first one will largely be constructed next year. That's for you to decide, I think.
And that's what, yeah, the
Well, let me
decision will
ask
be y'all.
this. Are we, what what funds next year will we have available for roundabouts? Just for one, for two? I mean, how many are we looking at? Aside from Donaghy, whatever, Donaghy's already kind of
Right.
built in, but of this list, how many can we fund for next year?
There will be enough money in the impact fee account to build one next year, and I think without Tyler here to back me up, and also without knowing exactly how much it's going to cost, since I haven't designed it, I haven't really done a good cost estimate. It's possible that we could build another one the year after that. Worst case scenario is we have to wait another year yet.
Yeah, that's the
So-
last discussion you and I and Tyler had, was one annually.
Yes, that's,
Well, as opposed to putting up a light at Salem and Irby, I'd just soon do it right. I mean, if we're gonna do it and put a roundabout there, with the caveat that knowing that Salem, and you'll know this obviously, Salem's gonna be expanded at some point, make it big enough now to handle the expansion of Salem at some point, but Irby and Salem,
That's what I wrote.
There's gonna be some, I think correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mark, I think City of Worcester is going to have sewer in the very near future. And there's a number of lots for sale up there, so there's a pretty good indication that the traffic on Salem, coming from the Worcester area, going to and from, is going to really pick up on Salem Road. Yeah, it is.
so, Irby and Salem, is that thumbs up for the next roundabout for
Thumbs up.
everybody?
Build a big one.
Okay, all right.
Not my vote, but
Yeah, build it for the future, so that if we do widen
at
Salem.
least get the right of way, get everything we need
Sure.
and do what we can now in anticipation for the future.
I'll try to avoid making it too large. There are disadvantages to making it bigger than it needs to be, but I will certainly design it in such a way that if it needs to be expanded, it can be done
Yep.
efficiently.
We on one corner there.
Are we on one corner of it?
I'd like to go ahead and get started designing number 2 as well, if the council doesn't mind having that discussion.
I'd say Salem and Tyler,
Yeah.
just get Salem right, all
Okay.
we can. Put all the way down.
Okay. If it's okay with you, I'll probably put College and Ferris third on that list. I expect that after the roundabout gets built at College and Donaghy, it's going to stress College and Ferris quite a bit. So I'm going to be ready for Irby and Salem, and have Tyler and Salem and College and Ferris underway as well. That sounds good. Okay?
Got one question.
Yes,
I
of
know
course.
the answer to it, but I want you to say it.
Okay.
It's for people that have been asking about it. We were planning on resurfacing the road from College to Dave Ward Drive on Salem this year, correct?
This year, it'll actually be all the way from Washington to Cena Drive. It's the entirety of, you're talking about, oh, I'm sorry,
Salem.
Salem.
College to
I said
Dave
it'd been a long day, and I wasn't
Ward. Hey,
joking.
I'm sorry, man.
It's all right, it is.
He's been running up and down the levee too.
I know, that's what I said.
Salem,
From the roundabout on Salem and College
To
down to
Dave
Baylor.
Ward.
down to Dave Ward.
That
You-
goes back to the bridge. We're still waiting to hear on that federal grant on that. If that does not, if that falls through, I think we looked at doing a micro abrasion on that section there. We talked about it to make it a better surface until we can get in there and rebuild it. So we've got a couple of options there, but that area is up for some work.
When are we resurfacing Tyler?
Tyler's this year.
Washington this
That's your year.
Should be ready to go in June, shouldn't we? Shouldn't we?
Yes, it's advertising right now. The bids will open, I think we open bids June 5th. So we will be prepared to award it at the next council meeting after that.
And I was going to ask each of you, it's entirely up to you, we're trying to stay somewhat ahead of the Conway School District. Would y'all be okay with maybe having a special council meeting once he gets bids to go ahead and approve that project so we can get it started? Okay.
Yes.
That project will be awarded in 2 phases, as I mentioned earlier. So the west of Tucker Creek, as soon as the council awards that, we'll issue notice to proceed the next day, and they'll have 60 to 90 days to complete it. The east of Tucker Creek, has got the sidewalk project in it, which takes a little more time. It also has the railroad involved. And they're presumably going to be overlaying all the way up to the railroad panel. And there's a lot of permitting that goes involved that will slow that one down significantly. But it'll still be this year.
And I know we talk a lot about roundabouts, especially on social media. It generates a lot of interest, but I also want everybody to know that Finley's crew resurfaced 58 streets last year. And this year, I know we're going to do Stanley Russ, Tyler Street, Morningside, Tucker Creek, South Davis.
College.
And College, so there's a lot. I know you saw a lot of asphalt going down last year. You're going to see a lot going down this year, too. So keep up the good work, Finley.
Yes, sir. Thank you all.
That's all we have till 6:30.
Don't right where to put the tourniquet when you cut your head
His
like
mom's
that.
in the hospital, so I text him.
Right there, I put that tourniquet right around your neck,
Pretty
and just
bad?
twist till it stops bleeding.
Yeah.
Has she been sick?
Hey,
lately?
what? We got a chance of different one.
So he said he
water
was
get
trying
to
to
the
call
airport,
me
we got a chance.
for the girls.
The water
So
making it to there from the
I
river.
told him I'd call him back.
Only
if
if
I had to
only if
call.
it tops the levee.
borrow this a minute?
Yep, you sure can.
Better, sorry. Or what we have.
Somebody's got it.
We better not ever do that.
Oh, he wouldn't do that to
Oh,
you.
my
Oh,
gosh.
that's good to know.
Don't even, please, really, I mean, I would do that.
Now, I'm gonna wait till we pack the place.
Don't have him off, he'll be sorry, I tell you. Did you get yours working?
Hey, Chuck.
He's working on it.
Yeah, mine.
I figure I could use him.
Y'all got a full proof?
Mine wasn't working, but it's working now.
Thank you very much, sir.
Mark's been working up.
Thank you.
Yeah, mine.
That's old school.
I still got 60% battery life left.
And, I know, I missed the last time.
You ought to have 100%. It's 100, that's right.
We're good.
You ready, man? You got your prayer?
Other trees.
Good evening, everyone. We always proceed each council meeting with a word of prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would like, please feel free to join us.
Yes, if you'll bow with me. Our gracious Father, we thank you for the blessings that you've given us. We thank you, Lord, for this great city that you've made us stewards of. We ask, Lord, for protection for all of our residents here in Conway and as well as in Faulkner County and abroad. And we just ask, Lord, for everything that we do and say in this meeting. We just pray, Lord, that it'll be done to your glory. And we ask this in your name. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now call this meeting to order. Mr. Garrett, call the roll, please.
Mr. Hawkins? Here. Mr. Grimes? Here. Mr. Pruitt? Here. Mr. Ledbetter? Here. Ms. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Ms. Isby?
Here.
Okay, you should have received copies of the April 23rd, 2019 City Council minutes. Any corrections, changes, or comments?
Make a motion for approval as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted. There's no further discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Before we move to our first bit of business tonight, as you'll recall, we started recognizing some of our businesses in the industry that have been doing business in Conway for some time and helped us make a successful city. And tonight, we're going to start with the Conway Human Development Center and Ms. Sarah Murphy. Give you a little bit of background on CHDC.
Come on in.
CHDC received its first resident in September of 1959. CHDC has been serving its community and citizens in the state of Arkansas for the city of Conway for almost 60 years. The Conway Human Development Center is nationally accredited at the highest level by the Commission of Accreditation and Rehabilitation Facilities and is certified by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. CHDC is also certified and regulated by the Department of Education and the Department of Health. Arkansas was one of 47 states to develop a state school for children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There are 1957, $1,200,000 appropriated to begin construction. Today, the Conway Human Development Center is one of Arkansas's 5 state-managed residential training facilities for people with intellectual disabilities. It is located on a 409-acre site here in the city of Conway. They provide services to 480 individuals who have intellectual disabilities ranging from profound to mild. And they employ approximately 1,100 staff, making it one of the largest employers in Conway and Faulkner County. Every individual served and guardian is encouraged to exercise his or her opportunity to provide input into the development of the individual program plan, and individual strengths, needs, abilities, and preferences are utilized in the development of his or her IPP. Long-range goals are established from short-term goals and developed to support the desired long-range outcome. Since September of 1959, CHD has operated under 11 governors, 7 superintendents, and Ms. Sarah Murphy is the first CHDC female superintendent. They're a tremendous partner for the city of Conway. The Owens Complex, that the city of Conway operates, that's on CHGC land. So they are a great partner. And next is Mr. Rick Sal.
Oh,
Yeah, Sal Architects was founded by Rick Sal in October 1995. Is a full-service architectural firm. I say that about architecture. You did. The firm has designed hundreds of projects across the state of Arkansas, with more than 100 of those right here in Conway. Projects find include retail, office buildings, churches, clinics, government buildings, schools, and many others. Some of the businesses that have been designed here in Conway are the Chamber of Commerce, Conway Corporation's new office, our tennis facility, out on West Street, the Municipal Airport, Antioch Baptist Church, Ian and Jeans, Conway Station Park Boys Facility, City of Colleges Park Girls Softball Facility, the Boys and Girls Club, the Faulkner County Criminal Justice Center, and many more. And currently, we're working with Rick on the new Conway City Hall. And after 24 years of business, they'd like to think of themselves as the hometown architect for Conway and Faulkner County. And I can tell you, it's a pleasure to work with Rick. Next, we have Tokuson. Tokuson was incorporated in October 17th of 1989. Wow, I can't believe it's been that long.
Long time.
As a new American company, primarily in the business of manufacturing steel cord for the tire and automotive industry. Tire cord was previously manufactured for the U.S. industry by the parent company Tokuson in Japan. This family-owned business has been a quality manufacturer of many of our products for the automotive, textile, medical, solar, and electronics industry, with roots all the way back to 1894. The growing demand for steel belts and radial tiles provided the U.S. market for high-quality tire cord. The Japanese owners and directors chose Conway, Arkansas, above several locations. Conway is centrally located. Geographically, Conway offers river, rail, and interstate highway transportation. Conway has good, stable supply of utilities. A number of tax incentives and others offered to locate in Conway. And most importantly, Conway has an excellent community education system and a skilled workforce needed to make good steel cord. 2019 marks the 30th anniversary for Tokuson USA here in Conway. And during this time period, the market has evolved. 30 years ago, there were 7 suppliers of steel cord in the USA. Today, there's only 3 independent suppliers remaining. And you guys are one of them. And we are so glad that you're doing business in Conway. Good to be here. Finally, tonight, you guys may not recognize this fellow. Next is Moix Recreational Vehicles. They opened up the business in 1976 as a motorcycle trailer sales located in Conway. As you all know, Frank Moix was an alderman for a number of years here in Conway and had a great hand in helping Conway develop. This business has continued to grow, and through the years, it's occupied several different locations around the city of Conway, including 2 restaurants, Sirloin Stockade and Tommy's Cafeteria, as well as an Exxon gas station located at exit 125. In August of 1960, maybe you and I will remember this. In August of 1987, a semi-tractor came off Interstate 40 and struck the gas station that Frank was leasing, forcing them to move to the current location of Collar Drive. That was a heck of a fire, wasn't it? Hey, that was a doozy. They purchased property on Collier Drive and began construction immediately, and were actually finishing and moving in January of 1988. Move to Collier Drive also coincided with the renaming of the business to Moix Recreational Vehicles. Moix RV has shared the location with the Waterbed Warehouse, which is owned and operated by Mary Jane Moix. Prior to moving to the location on Collier, the Waterbed Warehouse had been operating out of a small metal building located just behind the Exxon at exit 125. Michael Moix joined his father in the business in June of 1993. And at this time, Frank and Michael decided to make the move into the Little Rock market by establishing an RV service facility in southwest Little Rock. Moix RV operated this facility from June to 1993 until May 2007. During the mid-2000s, Frank and Michael began the process of acquiring additional property and facilities that they occupy today on Collier and moved the entire operation, which we are glad that you did, back to Conway in 2007. One unique aspect of our business is Camp Moix. Camp Morris was established in 2011 as a camping club to help us interact with our customers, as well as increase our customers' utilization of their units. Frank, Michael, we are so glad that you moved everything to Conway, and my wife wants me to buy one of those, Frank, so I guess I need to come see you. She said we're gonna buy one and take the grandkids wherever they wanna go, so. Okay. Our first order of business for this meeting is the approval of the monthly financial reports ending April 30th, 2019. Mr. Winningham.
Good to see everybody. I missed last month for a school function my son had, so don't want to miss out on those. But good news, we rebounded. Sales tax was up a little over 6% compared to the same month last year, so we're almost to flat. We're still down about 1 1/3% for the year compared to 2018. The bottom line there is not too pretty. $479,000 net expense through April. That typically happens through the first quarter of the year until we receive our first big ad val receipt from the county, which we have now. You'll see that on the May financials, and it looked like it was up about 7% over last year. So that's good news. That number should look a lot better when we meet in June to look at the May. Other than that, everything, and that ad val will also affect the street fund. As I'm sure you folks are aware, there's a revenue line item there. Other than that, everything is pretty quiet, so I'd be glad to answer any questions or take it whatever direction the council wishes.
There was a question earlier about funding availability for streets and for roundabouts, particularly this year and into next year. Can you maybe shed some light on that?
Is building new roundabouts?
Yes.
Yeah, the impact fees is what we use to do the one at College and Country Club. So that's, I think most of our other revenue sources, we've got, Finley and the mayor have, intent to spend that for overlays and maybe some drainage issues and so forth. But as far as how much is available, I really couldn't say that, but I can tell you that we've got the street impact fee, which is used to expand traffic flow capacity. And then our pay-as-you-go sales tax, which can be used for major street projects. I think we've used that for roundabouts in the past. And our new street 3/8 cent sales tax is just for overlays and reconstruction. So we couldn't use that. And then also our street fund revenue could be used for it, but we've got so much, maintenance and upkeep that need to be done on the streets that those funds are tied up as well.
I think the goal that we have, Tyler, is one roundabout annually. And we want to know, I think Mr. Hawkins, the rest of us want to know if we had the funds to do one annually as we go.
Looking at the last page of financials, our balance in street impact right now is almost 1.1 million. And that College and Country Club roundabout is paid for, so I would just defer to Finley as to how much a roundabout would be, and if we could fit it in that budget, then I would think it could be done. I guess it probably depends on where we want to put it and how much right-of-way needs to be purchased. And well, we can't use impact for right-of-way, but we've got a pretty nice little pot of impact fee money there for those roundabouts.
Any further questions for Mr. Winningham?
Make a motion to approve the monthly financials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the monthly financials. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Winningham. Next up, we have a report of our standing committees, starting with community development. Mr. Hawkins, we'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item is a resolution setting a public hearing to discuss closing a portion of Factory Street right-of-way between Mill and Garland, and this is Resolution R-1913.
13.
Setting a public hearing, is that right?
Make a motion for the adoption of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve to set a public hearing to discuss the closing of a portion of Factory Street between Mill and Garland. Any further discussion?
That date is June the 25th, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, sir.
June 25th. Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7-0. And Mr. Hawkins, item number 5 has been taken care of.
I got that message.
Okay.
Thank you. Next item is a resolution setting a public hearing to discuss vacating all of the Audubon Place right-of-way adjacent to and abutting lots 1 to 3, 4A, 5A, and 6 and 7 in Audubon Place subdivision. This would be on the 25th of June, and we have a resolution for this item. It's Resolution R-1914.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve a public hearing on 6/25 of 2019 for Audubon Place subdivision. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett,
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7-0.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution approving the program year 2019 Community Development Block Grant budget and submittal of action plan. And Kiara, hi.
Hi. So the resolution may look a little similar to the one that I presented a couple months ago. However, this one has the exact numbers that we were allocated from HUD. You'll probably notice a couple of changes. One change being the rental and utility assistance. We actually will not be able to do that this year. We're going to move it to next year because we found out that that would actually be a service, and that would take away from the transportation services that we already do, and we want to be able to let them know on the front end and not the back end, so we're just going to move it till next year. Another change is the park improvements along with the emergency shelter. The park improvements we're just going to do to finish out Fifth Avenue, as well as the emergency shelter, the acquisition, as well as the design of the emergency shelter, and we're going to also use next year's money for the emergency shelter, but we decided to not do all of this year because we still have to complete a feasibility study to figure out what all goes into the emergency shelter to make sure that it has the proper amount of beds and everything that it needs. So we have everything ready to go. The only thing we're waiting on right now is the green light from HUD, the Little Rock field office, to be able to submit the action plan.
Make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Any other discussion? Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7-0. Thank you, Kiara.
Thanks, Kiara. Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to approve the transfer of a license to Vincent's Road Hog Barbecue located at 2850 Prince Street, Suite 99 in Conway. And the ordinance to be read is ordinance 01945.
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0. Any questions? Would you please state your name and address for the record, please?
Vincent Sherry at 43 White Oak Drive. Our business is 2850 Prince Street.
And your barbecue's very good.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We try. Thank you all. I've seen you in there a couple of times. I didn't get to say hi. I'm always busy in the back for some reason.
I make a motion for adoption.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any other discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Thank you all.
I got 2 things in this world that I'm very cautious of. One is, well, I won't tell you what one is, but 2 is never eat at a restaurant with a skinny guy that's the owner.
My wife wants me to lose weight. I said, no. I said, I'm not doing it. Nobody's going to trust you. My doctor told me to today. I said, no, I'm good, Dr. Conway. Yes, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 5, as the mayor said, has been pulled from the agenda this evening because they did the right thing, came and paid us some money for things that they needed to take care of. So we'll take item 5 off of the agenda and move on to item number 6, which is a resolution requesting that the Faulkner County Tax Collector place a lien against property at 2127 Hairston Street for expenses incurred by the city. The total expenses are $307.27. And the resolution to be read for this item is Resolution R-1916.
Motion for adoption. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution to place a lien on the property located at 2127 Harrison Street in the amount of $307.27. Is there anyone that'd like to speak to this?
I was going to say, is there an owner or representative of an owner from that property at 2127 Hairston Street?
If not, Mr. Garrett.
Here, let me see.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is a resolution to condemn and raise the structure located at 217 Davis Street for the Code Enforcement Department. And we have a resolution to be read for this particular item. It's Resolution R-1917. Is there anyone that would like to, yeah.
Mr. Frazier?
Okay.
If you would state your name and address, please, sir.
Robert W. Frazier, 225 Davis Street. To Mr. Castleberry and McCullum and members of the City Council, as many of you know what my name is, just stated, my wife Mary and I are 52-year residents and taxpayers of Conway. Over the years, have been helpful and respectful to the city of Conway in many aspects as a longtime resident. During storms and city challenges, I've always there to be part of the community, helping neighbors in a few situations restore power to homes without power. On May 13, a significant life event took place at my properties here in Conway. The catastrophic and life-changing event is only referenced from a building inspection standpoint and not part of tonight's agenda. I make reference to the event of May 13 to brief the council on the fact that a joint inspection of city inspector Spencer Clausen and me, the property owner, meeting took place on May 15th that resulted in 3 buildings being inspected and approved, primarily 2, to remain in use and not destroyed. In regards to tonight's agenda, item 7, I ask and insist that a similar building inspection on 217 Davis take place Friday with city inspector and me as a property owner. Any deficiencies will be provided to me for actions needed on my part. I request this inspection be at Friday at 10 a.m. After results of this inspection are reported back to Mayor Castleberry and the City Council, you'll have the most recent information for any decisions going forward. Conditions at 217 Davis, clearing the inside of the house as well as through thorough evaluation of the roof has taken place in the past week. As a result, the tree branch damage and overall age of the roof actions need taken. Re-roof of the house with approximately 8 sheets of underlayment, 4 ceiling joists, and 8 foot of wall and a back door. This re-roof and minor structure repair can be completed in 30 days. The root cause of the leaking roof is the tree storm damage. However, the entire roof will be recovered. The appearance of the house will be greatly improved by a new roof, painting of the exterior of the house or siding in the next phase, and front porch repairs make the house have much more improved curb appeal by mid-fall of 19.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Do you have any questions for Mr. Frazier? Thank you, Mr. Frazier.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and City Council, my name is Spencer Clausen. I'm the Code Enforcement Officer that's been working with the Fraziers and handling this. We responded to a complaint about 217, 225, and 231. We're only here to talk about 217 tonight. After the complaint, we inspected it and determined that 217 was uninhabitable and it was a danger to public health and safety. I'm here for state law and city ordinance, ask you to condemn it so that we can do our procedure to have the structure raised. So, anybody have any questions?
Are they living in this property?
No, ma'am.
They
It's
aren't.
not being lived in. It's totally vacant. Yes, ma'am.
So did I understand correctly, Mr. Frazier? Did you say you wanted 30 days to repair the structure? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, to stop the leaking.
That's a roof. He said fall of 2019 to get,
The leaking is on an add-on kitchen at the west side of the house. The structure itself is as sound as it's ever been. You can go over there and see where it was put on and added on. The only bad part of it is an add-on room that I have no earthly idea when it was added on. But it was not part of the original structure. The structure is sound.
Based on.
Would that be accurate?
In my determination, that's not accurate. It's, the building is major disrepair, not just from where the limb or whatever damaged the roof. It's been leaked in for, I would assume, years. Mold, very prevalent in there. You almost can't even breathe in there because of the mold smell. I don't think that fixing the roof would make much difference to the structure. It'd keep it from being rained in the future, but there's been significant amount of damage done from weather, from just neglect over the years, and I don't believe that it could ever be in any kind of position to be habitable again.
And is that coming from you, but also?
That's coming from me, but it's also coming from Ken Eckert, one of our inspectors, who walked through there. I believe that you received the video, and we have it up here if anybody'd like to look at it any further. But we walked through it, filming, and it's in bad shape. And that is, like I said, per the inspector. He didn't feel like it was suitable for public health and safety to remain standing.
When was this picture taken?
Sir, this was when we executed the administrative search warrant. I believe the date on that would be mid-April, 14th, 15th.
Look at it at all since then?
During your cleanup, sir, we looked at the outside to see no change, but this video kind of speaks for itself if the council members would like to watch it. There's Ken Eckert, our city inspector.
And it was his opinion that the only solution.
The only solution would be to condemn and take it down. If you want to kind of scrub through just slowly, kind of go room from room, and if we get into the back of the house, which is where the limb or whatever damaged the roof, you'll be able to see the type of damage that was caused.
Could you kind of go, this isn't obviously the first time Mr. Frazier's been given notice that he's had issues with his property. Kind of maybe roughly give the council a time frame for the Fraziers and the notice they've been provided.
This all started as far as when I came into the picture this year. There's been other instances in the past, I believe 2014, 2015, and dating back as far as 2009, as far as interactions with the Fraziers and code enforcement.
wow.
Is this in the historic district?
It's in the urban overlay, I believe.
Thank you.
It's fairly South Davis, but not quite
Okay.
technically South Davis. It's the 200 block.
How do you let it get that bad? I mean, how does that happen?
This is right when we get back to where the limb caused the damage. And I'm saying the limb, that's what, I'm just quoting Mr. Frazier, I'm not sure what caused it. But you can see the insulation has run out from whatever's in the attic. And it's squishy right there from weather. And if the sound was up, you could hear my foot squeegeeing water out of the carpet. It's just been rained on for.
There's got to be varmints living in it, I would think.
Yes, ma'am. There was, Ken Eckert pointed out, as you can see on there, there's rat waste. And he even mentioned the smell of urine in the house.
Thank you.
And One thing of note is it's actually a duplex, and I'm just in the south side of it right now. And if you could scrub up a little bit, there's the roof. As you can see, the leaks and the damage that the limb has caused.
Would you say that that's a solid structure?
No, it's not.
And also for the council's information, the resolution, state law and our ordinances require that we're having a hearing. If you vote to approve the resolution to condemn the property, then the city would move forward, and in 30 days, the property would be taken down. The cost of that would be assessed towards the property owners. Now, we would take it down if it's still standing. If Mr. Frazier wants to take it down, that's fine. He can do that, but he has to do it within that 30-day period. But as you are well aware, this is not something we come to council very often at all, if ever. And so you can see the seriousness
Yeah.
of the situation.
Yeah. Had there been a lot of complaints on this particular location? Is that why it showed up on your desk?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This was quite a few complaints over the years, like I said, dating back to 2009.
And we just conducted probably the largest cleanup
Yeah.
that I can remember of Mr. Frazier's 3 properties there on Davis Street.
Makes me so sad that it looks like that. I mean, I make a motion for adoption of the resolution.
Second.
That's
Thank you, Spencer.
terrible.
Thank you
I
all.
mean, it's beyond repair to me. I think it comes down to that we should.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution to condemn and raise the structure located at 217 Davis Street. Any further discussion from anyone in the audience?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
If you repaired it, what are you planning on doing with it? That looks like major repair, are you?
As I asked the question, a major difference has been made since he took those pictures. Major difference has been taken.
Like what?
Like it's been cleaned out, and there was no carpet in that back room. It's linoleum. And of course, part of that's already been took out. But as I stated, that room, that structure now, and there's a difference. I've been around building ever since early 60s. The structure is sound. I would beg someone else to come and look at it. Because the buildings that were going to be condemned, all of a sudden didn't need to be because they took a good look at it. But the structure is there. That kitchen was added on some years later, because there's one before where the joint took place. You can tell when all of these older houses were added on to, when people put a bathroom on them, or a this or a that, over the years. They're all over town. They're that, you could call it a batten strip, whatever. They added on to another room. The joists are different, and that kitchen was added on, and that's the only room that's really bad. And there's, I don't know whether there's any mold in there now or not, but it's been cleaned up. But all of the stuff that would have been damaged would have had to be stripped out and replaced anyway, like the floor, the ceiling, and like I say, those joists need replacing to fix, to re-roof that section. But that is an add-on kitchen, pure and simple, and anybody that knows building can come over there and determine that.
The thing is, our code enforcement guy that looked at this has been building houses forever. He's been in the building business for years.
He's been building for the last 300 years. That's an add-on kitchen. I don't know whether that matters,
It's,
but it was an add-on room. It is not part of the house structure.
but we're talking
But
about
it's
structure and the
connected to the
integrity of the
house,
home.
Mr.
is what we're
Frazier, would
talking
you
about.
come up to the mic, please, sir?
It's, if it's add-on, it's connected to the house, so it is part of the structure.
Well, that depends on who defines structure, I suppose.
Is it connected?
Yes,
Okay, it's part of the structure.
but it was an add-on part. Let me ask you a question.
Doesn't matter.
When a storm comes through town and somebody's house gets a tree limb put through the garage, do you make them tear the whole entire house down, or do they replace the garage and fix what was
They usually
rained on?
replace it before it starts molding.
Probably, if you're living in it, you know.
Well, I mean,
There were
that's-
extenuating circumstances
done
that
for the
there's no need of
molding?
me going into.
What have you done for the mold issue? Have you done like specific?
All of that stuff was stripped out and is gone.
Spencer, would that be the whole, I mean, mold is not just on the outside, it's inside, like on the structure itself too, right? Can it be? I mean,
I suppose mold can be on that side of the structure, but what I'm talking about when I witnessed myself was the inside of the add-on part of this kitchen, I suppose we was talking about. There's, where the tree fell through, water has been leaking in there to the floor of this property. And the water, I mean, there's no place for it to go in the house, but into the plywood, into the floor joist, into the drywall, into the studs. And in that back room, the smell of mold was so strong that we couldn't even be back there.
Okay.
I mean, it's permeated throughout the entire structure, not just in the carpet comes out. Once the carpet comes out, you're looking at, I mean, there's plenty of other layers of this structure that you would need to get out of there to remediate the mold.
What would even be your purpose in fixing the house? Would you be fixing it to rent? Would you be fixing it for you to live in?
I would not be, I had lived next door. I don't know whether I'd rent it or not, but I'd fix it so that it was weather tight. I mean, I don't see where that really and truly matters. But you know, just try to get, I've just had more in the past recent times than one person can deal with and no one else to deal with it either. But I have a hard time understanding why this one person, your building inspector, can condemn this when he was going to condemn 2 other buildings. But when he got back over there and looked at them, he said, oh, no, this is fine, you know. I don't know what the criteria was for tearing down the other 2 that they've now decided are fine, because I wasn't told.
I just hate it's come down to this. I mean, it's come down to
Well,
us.
I do too, ma'am.
making a
You don't know
decision.
how much I hate it. I hate it that what took place over there. I've got a picture book back here. But as opposed to, I had a judge to tell me something that was illegal. He said, just get some big dumpsters over there and just throw all that stuff in it. Then you throw oil and this and that and the other that I had there at the time. I'm not going to say I shouldn't have had it.
Mr. Frazier, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're talking about the structure at
Okay.
217 Davis.
But you know, the whole thing is all tied together, and it's still ongoing. I was told they were going to take bids for what they've already done. I haven't seen none of them, and I don't know what I owe you yet. And I really and truly don't think that it's right, fair, or nothing else on 1 or 2 people's word to start tearing down more stuff when I don't know what I owe you at this point. And my places have been totally destroyed. They haven't been cleared up, as the cabin said. I would like to see a show of hands of everybody that's went over there and walked and looked at it. I don't care where you've seen the cabin or not, because it was a bald-faced lie. Who has gone over and looked at my properties since Monday after Mother's Day, a week ago, 2 weeks ago yesterday?
I drove by it.
I didn't go.
That does you absolutely no good, because the street is lower than the property. Has anybody been over there and looked at it since then? Okay, Spencer has.
Well, Kim too.
Kim.
Kim's been up there.
Let's
Well, they
get,
were there.
Mr. Frazier, let's get back to the property at 217
Okay.
Davis, please. That's what we're discussing tonight.
What are the questions have you got? I've told you what I was going to do to it.
Do y'all have any other questions for Mr. about 217 Davis?
No, I'm just trying to figure out what was his plans for it.
Okay.
It was up to us demolishing it or him. I mean, I was just.
No, that's a fair question.
Settlement thing, or you plan on renting it out, or what? Because I haven't been in the property like you said, but it was more to that picture than the kitchen area that was shown.
There was. Yeah, they waltzed all the way through it, but the rest of it's not in horrible shape. The kitchen was. The kitchen was.
I call the question.
Question has been called.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this resolution, condemn and raise the structure located at 217 Davis Street. Mr. Garrett,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7-0. Pass
Resolution
it.
R-1917.
Terrible.
Mr. Hawkins.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to dispose of inventory for the Permits and Inspection Department. And I'm not sure who's going to come forward and tell us about this. Jamie,
Miss Jamie.
hi.
Good evening. We have a
do we got?
vehicle in our permits department that has reached its useful life. You'll see it's 2009 model and it has a zero book value.
Because we're making them tear down.
I make a motion that we allow the disposal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the request to dispose of the inventory. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
7-0. Thank you, Jamie.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to approve the revision to the standard detail for roadway and drainage construction for the Transportation Department. And, Mr. Vinson, I thought you were still with us.
Sorry.
I know it's been a long day.
Evidenced earlier, I'm moving a little slow. You guys all, I think, have a copy of the standard details. It's the most recent revision of the standard details. That's it right there. Hand that up. Will you hold that up? Does everybody have that? That's it right there. That's what we're talking about. Sorry, I gave away all my copies. You have seen this before, and I promised if we ever made a major revision to this document that I'd bring it back to you. And the first time that you saw it, it was the first time that it had ever been published. So we've found a lot of mistakes and corrected those mistakes. In addition, the last dozen or so pages is the street cross sections that are required within the city of Conway. Those have received a major update. Essentially, there were lots of options on each one of those pages before, which was causing some confusion amongst our developers. And we have streamlined that, and I anticipate that it's going to make things easier to understand and a lot cheaper for developers.
Great.
That's it. Just wanted
Do we need
to,
any action on this, Mayor?
Just need a motion and a second to approve the,
So moved.
Second.
we have a motion and a second to approve the standard detail for roadway and drainage construction. Any other questions or discussion?
We can come back to you in 25 years and go, Finley, this isn't right. Yeah?
maybe so.
You'll fix it?
I'll fix it.
Okay.
25 years, Finley will only be 50.
Well, I said 25 years.
That's funny, boss.
Maybe both.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Finley.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating funds and accepting bids for the mowing, landscape management, and herbicide application for the Transportation Department.
Yes, sir.
Jamie?
We received two bids, one for mowing and then one for the herbicide application. I did send this to the mowing to 12 different vendors. The landscape or herbicide was sent to 11 different vendors. We did not receive a good turnout on our bids, but we did receive one apiece, and we thought they were good bids. So we're asking you to approve these. The mowing is for 26 roundabouts in the right-of-way on Prince and Dave Ward. And herbicide application, we have over 32 miles of curb gutter and sidewalks, 12.9 acres of creek, and then 8.2 miles of drainage ditches.
I make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0.
Make a motion for adoption and the emergency clause.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes? Aye. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Emergency clause? Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes? Aye. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye.
Both of those pass 7-0. Thank you, Jamie. That's gonna help our city look a lot better, too.
Yeah, it is. Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating funds and entering into an agreement for construction observation services for the Transportation Department. I'm interested to find out what in the world that is. Jamie?
Finley may have to help me a little bit. This is to help us keep up with the increased street activity. I think you've probably noticed that. but basically someone to help us inspect those construction projects.
It's construction super, not, what'd you call it the other day, Finley?
It's a construction inspector.
Construction
So
inspector.
We have one construction inspector right now who is works for us on a contract basis, and he just can't keep up with the work. He inspects basically everything we do, but more importantly, he inspects everything that private developers build, and he needs help. And we have, the plan is to hire a full-time construction inspector to help him out. And we're advertising that, but we need to get him some immediate help to make sure that standards are met.
And a couple of things I want to point out. One, our roads project have increased tremendously. We all know that. And two, I want everyone to know this does not come out of the sales tax funds that go to our street repair.
That's correct.
I'll make a motion to waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Ordinance 01947. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
7-0.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance appropriating funds and approving approving professional services for the Salem Road improvements, and that's College to Dave Ward Drive, and we have an ordinance to read for this. It's ordinance 01948.
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0.
Move for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Finley and Jamie.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is consideration to approve Mariah Bruner, Kim Lane, and Isaac Sims to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board, and I move that we grant those nominations.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve these names for the nomination to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Board. Any discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7-0.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance accepting a grant from the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program and appropriating matching grant funds for the Historic District Commission to be administered by the Planning and Development Department. We have an ordinance to read for this item. It's ordinance 01949.
Make a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0. James.
So, good news. The historic preservation grant that we applied for with matching funds, we received, so that will enable us to start advertising for an RFQ to hire a consultant to do our historic preservation plan, citywide historic preservation plan. So that's what this is entailing and for.
I appreciate you seeking that.
Yep.
Make a motion for adoption of the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
7-0.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance to amend the Conway subdivision ordinance 00003 in regards to sidewalks for the Planning and Development Department. And James, go.
Yes. So if you all might remember, we had changed our sidewalk in lieu fees last year to sort of index them to some RDOT standards, construction standards for cost. We thought, well, that will allow us to sort of keep up with changes in costs from year to year so that we won't have to be revisiting this constantly. One thing that we did not anticipate is that we would go, for instance, in 1 year from a fee that would be about $19.46 a lineal foot to almost $29 a lineal foot this year.
And so that kind of very large jump was very shocking to developers. It was a little bit shocking to us as staff. So what we're wanting to do instead of that is take a 4-year rolling average, which would take us from currently 28 down to 21, which is much closer to what the actual cost for the street department to do that type of construction. So it'll help level out those jumps, because some years RDOT has some very expensive projects that have a lot of challenges that may deal with rough topography, and when you have something like that, it can kind of mess with the cost a little bit, cost figures.
James and I met with a number of developers about this, and they liked the idea of it and thought it was fair.
I make a motion to waive the 3 readings. Have we done that already?
No, we haven't.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? 7-0.
I make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance and the emergency clause.
Second.
There's not an emergency clause on this one, is there?
Yeah, it has one on the.
All right, I
body of
missed
it.
that. Okay, all right. So we have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance with the emergency clause. Any further discussions? Mr. Garrett?
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
And the emergency clause, Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Those both pass 7-0.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is an ordinance amending the Conway zoning ordinance to amend setbacks in certain zones for the Planning and Development Department. And James, you're still standing there. You must have
Still-
something else to say.
Still standing. So you may be noticing over the next few months that we'll have numerous ordinance changes to our land use regulations. Some of the things that we're tweaking and correcting, some of the things that we're wanting to make things, I would say in some instances, right size or correct it. Some of the things are a little bit too onerous on developers, and so we're wanting to make it easier on developers without compromising our development standards. We don't want to take a step back in terms of development standards, but we do have instances where things, if we made some changes, it would make sense. This is one, we had someone come to us with a request. They said, we would really like to replat our property to reduce the setbacks. And so me and the assistant director started looking at it, and I said, wow. Well, we've got in the for MF1, MF2, and MF3 for multifamily, we've got a setback requirement of 25 feet. And it would make a lot of sense if it were reduced down to 15. Similarly with C2 and C3, if those things were reduced down to 15 feet, that actually would be achieving some of the goals that we have with our development review standards of increasing walkability, bringing structures closer to the street. And so it's one of those, we identified this as being one of the areas where one part of our code is saying do this, and another part of our code is saying do this, and we're trying to bring those two things in line so that we don't have to have, if somebody is wanting to achieve the goal of our development review standards, that we're not forcing them into a variance process that takes time and money to do that. And so this is really, and I think a lot of ways, making things more walkable and provide more flexibility for developers as well.
I make a motion that we approve this request.
We need to wait 3 readings.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
Make
okay.
a motion to waive 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0.
Make a motion for the adoption of the ordinance, and I have it as 51.
51.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
And last but not least, we have an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance to change the title of zoning code for the Planning and Development Department. We have an ordinance for this. It's ordinance O-1952. And one more time.
This is a small one. There is a sort of a little niche part of state law that, I think it's 1455-207, that allows technical codes to be adopted by reference. And so we'll be having larger changes to the zoning code in the future bigger sections. And so this would basically allow us to adopt those by reference rather than it necessarily being included in the full language of the ordinance, that it would be sort of Exhibit A to the ordinance. And so it's sort of one of those things that anticipating that we're going to have larger changes in the future, changing the title from zoning ordinance to zoning code is sort of a technical thing that we're taking care of as it relates to that.
I make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isbell?
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yes, sir. Overtime.
Next up, we have public service, and our first item is consideration to approve the disposal of inventory with equipment for the Parks and Recreation Department. Mr. Ibbotson.
Do we miss this one?
Anything washed out, Mr. Davidson?
Do we miss that one?
Not yet, sir. Trying not to be.
Carry on.
We presented a list of equipment that is way out of date. We'll put the Dodge truck up on public auction, and the scoreboards aren't. I wouldn't put that burden on anybody else. We thought about donating them, but they'd be better off buying new ones. And the zero-turn mower is just down to, we've cannibalized it. So it's just a
Down to zero
scrap
turn.
metal.
It's just about an eighth of a turn mower now.
I make a motion, we approve these disposal of assets.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the request to dispose of this inventory. Any discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7-0. Mr. Ibbotson, resolution to authorize donation of softball field light systems for Fifth Avenue Park to the city of Guy, Arkansas.
Yes, when we pulled the lights down at Fifth Avenue, the city of Guy requested those lights, and it requires the city council to approve that donation.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Be R1918. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7-0.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Dave. Thanks for all the work you've been doing. Next up, we have a resolution to utilize Federal Recreation Trail Program funds for the Stone Dam Creek Phase 2 project, which is on Donaghy to South German Lane for the Parks and Recreation Department. Miss Jamie.
Yes, sir, and we are working on the Phase 1. We received that $178,000. And before we apply for the next grant for Phase 2, we would like to ask your permission to do that. And that would be committing, I'm sorry. Our 20% would be $154,000. It's Parks Impact Fee Funds.
I make a motion to adopt the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this resolution. Any other discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Be R1919. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Jamie, are you gonna be able to get to work the rest of this week? Are you getting?
Try my best.
You may have to get a boat. Next up is consideration to approve the disposal of inventory for the Department of Sanitation. Mr. Hopper. Joe, would you briefly, too, just let the council know what's going on with the landfill?
Yeah, so today, at the end of the day, I checked it this morning. We had some water encroaching on our entrance road, and right before I left, I checked it again, and it's to the asphalt. So I expect tomorrow it'll be on the road. I don't know if we'll have to divert to another landfill tomorrow or the next day, but I feel for certain we'll have to this week. So I've made arrangements with the city of Morrilton, and I've also talked with the city of Little Rock, just in case, the interstates get closed, or we should have full continuity of service. We have discontinued yard waste collections this week. just so we can help out with sandbags and that kind of thing, so.
Is that coming from the Cadron, Joe?
Yes, sir.
That's
Yeah,
where
it's been backing up for a bit, and it is flowing backwards. First time I've ever seen a creek flow backwards.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes, sir.
Disposal of inventory?
Yes, so we have several pieces of equipment and some vehicles that are either not in use or scheduled for replacement. We have one that we may find a home for within the city, but we went ahead and added it to the list.
Make a motion that we allow the disposal of this inventory.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett,
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
7-0. Next up, Mr. Hopper. It's consideration to enter into an agreement with Pratt Recycling for the Department of Sanitation.
So, in the past couple of years, we've had some challenges with regards to recycling. One of our biggest challenges, aside from plastics, has been our mixed paper. Pratt Recycling's been our primary buyer, and usually they're the only bidder. And right now, it's getting very tough to move paper or mixed paper. And we think it's in our best interest to enter into an agreement with them, just to ensure that we can keep that material moving.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the agreement with Pratt Recycling. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0. Mr. Hopper, consideration to enter into a pipeline crossing agreement.
So we discussed this one back in October of 2018. After it was approved, we found that there was an error in the agreement. It called for a 3-inch line, and we need an 8-inch line. It's for a wastewater pipeline to go under the railroad from the MRF and tie into the main over near the animal welfare unit.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agreement with Union Pacific Railroad. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Hopper. And finally, an ordinance waiving the competitive bid process for the purchase of a refuse truck and roll-off truck for the Department of Sanitation.
So one of these trucks, we had initially intended to purchase off the Sourcewell contract. And then after speaking with Jamie, we just decided just to put them both on one ordinance and see if we could waive bids. One thing we've tried to do in the past few years is somewhat streamline our fleet. I'll get it out in a minute. Our fleet. So I think right now we've got about 5 different chassis and 4 chassis and 5 different trash bodies. And we've had some trouble with keeping qualified mechanics, and that causes more confusion when they're trying to learn all of these different trucks and pieces of equipment. So we've tried to somewhat get those all similar, to be similar chassis or similar trash bodies. And this is just more along those lines. So
Make a motion that we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Make a motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Pruitt? Aye. Mrs.
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Joe. And next, we have public safety, and we have an ordinance appropriating reimbursement funds for the Conway Police Department. Chief Spradlin.
Good evening. This is just a general accounting ordinance that you're used to seeing. Numbers are a little bit larger, but that's just because we hadn't been here in a few months, so that's nothing out of the ordinary.
Make a motion, we waive the 3 readings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the 3 readings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
A motion for adoption.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt this ordinance. Any further discussion? Mr. Garrett.
Be O 1954. Mr. Pruitt? Mr. Grimes?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Isby?
Yes.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you, Chief. And our final discussion will be medical marijuana violations. Mr. Clausen. It took me just a second.
Wow, okay.
How soon we forget.
So this is just kind of a discussion point. I wanted to get the council's opinions or temperature on. You know, obviously, everybody knows that Arkansas Constitution was amended by vote of the citizens to allow for medical marijuana. I think recently that we've had 2 cultivation centers and a few dispensaries around the state open up. As everyone knows, there is one location in Conway that plans on getting started hopefully sometime in the fall, I guess. So the question becomes, how do we handle that? The amendment lays out prohibited uses and possession of medical marijuana. And the whole process really puts law enforcement in a tough position. I was talking over kind of the situation with some friends in the municipal league, and based on those conversations, I kind of proposed the idea of, instead of, as it kind of gets a little bit complicated, but as the amendment states, that if you're using or possessing medical marijuana in violation of the amendment, then you're guilty of the possession of a controlled substance statute, misdemeanor possession, okay? So even if you purchased it and you possess it legally, if you step outside the protection of the constitutional amendment, then you're a criminal, right? When it seems a little bit, I'm not gonna say unfair necessarily, because the rules, everybody has to play by the rules, but it just seems like if you purchase and you possess it based on something that the state of Arkansas says it's okay, and you purchase it at an approved location, if you happen to violate it, it doesn't sit as well with me that you would use it, or that you would be charged with a criminal offense and potentially subject to jail time, or probation, or whatever it may be. And so I got in some discussions, and the thought process is that in an ordinance many years ago, I believe 081-25, the city council adopted basically state law, state code, Title V, so that the Conway police officers could deal with, I guess, violations of state law. And so to carry that thought process on, what in essence we potentially have the ability to do is, if a person has a valid registry card, okay, now that's a decision point for law enforcement in my eyes. If they have a valid card but happen to be using it or possessing it in one of those prohibited ways, then they could be handed a violation. Rather than what our Conway police officer would have to arrest them and then process them, okay? It also gets into a lot of other areas, as far as they would normally have to confiscate the medical marijuana. They would have to store it. They would have to send it off to the crime lab to test it. They would have to weigh it, and potentially have to store it, because it's a perishable item. They would have to store it in a special way. And then, not to mention the process that the person would have to go through, to deal with what would be a criminal charge for them. So I'm not so sure that's necessarily the best way to go about it. So that's why I was proposing, if the council would just allow me to draft basically an ordinance that would adopt the constitutional amendment and make it a code violation, where a person could be cited, given a court date, and potentially pay a fine if they're found to be in violation. That would give the officers more discretion, not necessarily discretion, but give them another avenue to deal with this. And the other thing too, is I'm worried about, is it would give, I think a lot of people are gonna be misinformed about what all this can be for them. And this will be an opportunity for us to educate them without making them a criminal.
Well, I think, I agree with you 100%. I think, I'm gonna say 99% of the problem is that they passed the law, but they never did really decide what they're gonna do about situations like this. And it's so vague out there, nobody still knows what's going on. And I think this will save us and the courts a lot of money and time than going through this process. The ticket thing, I think is great. That's just my opinion, because it can be a lot of time spent on incarceration, confiscation, and then coming to court that we can use for some other things that's a lot more pertinent. I'm not saying this, marijuana is down the totem pole, but we got a lot of other things, and our facilities are filling up with people that's committing other crimes that we need to have room for. So you got my vote. That's all I can say. You all right with that, Chief?
Chief, you good with that?
Yeah, I've been in discussion with the chief and his command staff, and they support it as well. Again, it gives them the opportunity to educate instead of, cuffing and stuffing somebody because they're using their medical marijuana on their front porch. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause
Would using it on the front porch be a prohibitive way?
Because that would be in public.
Yeah.
What else is a prohibitive way?
Well, and that's what drafting this is gonna be a little bit, but if they have over 2 ounces, they can have up to 2 ounces.
Okay.
But what if it's 2.1? What if, or if they're, anytime they're using it in public. And obviously, there's some things on there that I don't think that maybe they should, if they're using it around children.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I want everybody to know, that the issue in all of the jurisdictions that have adopted this, states, cities, whatever, is the driving while under the influence. Those type violations have gone up significantly. There will in no way be any tolerance for that. We're not making any exceptions for that. We will prosecute those. The police department's gearing up to hire or train other drug recognition experts. My office is prepared to prosecute those. There is no excuse for operating a motor vehicle in the city of Conway under the influence of medical marijuana. And so we're gonna treat those people as they should be treated, because they're a danger to everyone, obviously. But somebody that's waiting on, their brother to get out of Walmart with groceries and they happen to be using their medical marijuana shouldn't be arrested and then processed and everything that goes along with that. And so this just gives them another alternative.
Yeah, I'll echo what Theo said. Given all the other more important things that our police force has to deal with, and your office and our courts, I'd like to see those people spend as little time wasted on this as possible. So proceed, please.
Okay. I will, in the coming, hopefully by the next city council meeting, I plan on coming up with a draft. I can tell you some of our sister cities are interested in the concept, and they want to see what I draft, and then I'll run it through the municipal league as well to get some opinions. But I'll try to have a draft for you by next council meeting. I believe it's the 25th of June.
Yes.
Chief, you're good with this? Good.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Briefly, Mr. Ledbetter, help me remember everything that's going on. I'll just give you all a brief rundown on kind of where we are with our concerns with the river. The Corps of Engineers and the National Weather Service will both tell you that this is going to be bigger than the 1990 flood, and so they really do not have all of the statistics they need to really give an actual factual what they think. They've been very good to work with, been very forward in giving us information. Our primary concern when we first started was the levee itself. Now, we had a survey of our levee in 2017, and it passed. But this is an unprecedented event, so should the levee breach, then we do have a really major situation in Conway. That was one of our primary concerns. Just a moment. That was our primary concern. Our secondary concern was the amount of rain they had forecast for the Conway area. That, since we do not have the capability of releasing water from Tucker Creek into the river, and the possibility that if Palarm Creek pushes back into Lake Conway and we would not be able to get Stone Dam Creek water into there, we could have flooding in two different portions of Conway, the east side and the west side. That number, the precipitation amounts have been pushed back, and that has been spread out over several days. So we feel like we may have dodged a bullet there. Chief Ledbetter and the county and the city are both monitoring the levee, as is Ronald Brown and his family in Twig Satterfield. We don't anticipate anything. We just thought it was better to err on the side of caution and plan for this and start alerting to everyone that could be affected, as well as working on sandbagging operations. That being said, that's about where we are. Chief, is there anything else?
No, we're trying to provide sandbags make them as readily available as people need them.
And I'd like to brag on the Faulkner County Road Shop and the Faulkner County Judge's Office and OEM. They've been tremendous to work with. And our city employees have stepped up. Folks have shown up after work, before work, to help do sandbag. Everyone, our administrative assistants, police officers, firefighters, sanitation workers, Aaron and his group. So I can't say enough how proud I am of everyone that's worked together on this. Hopefully everything's going to be just fine, but we're going to stay on top of it until the threat passes. So that kind of brings everybody up to speed on where we are, except how Mark's got that big Band-Aid on his head, but we won't talk about that.
You still sandbags tomorrow, the rest of the week? Until
Yes, we're going to be sandbagging. We've taken our city employees, other than police and fire, and the SWAT team actually was our first group to start sandbagging operations. We've taken all of our crews off their normal duties, other than police and fire, to work in sandbagging operations until this passes. So it's been a good team effort by everybody from Conway and the county and the state, and I appreciate everybody. With that, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Hey, Chief, did that lady get her weapon? Do you know?